series of explosions rip through New York City. Sifting through the wreckage in search of one shred of evidence, the FBI and police are desperate for something to lead them to these ruthless terrorists. But the killers are careful to cover their tracks. As the bombings escalate, the FBI is in a deadly race to stop this murderous group with a dangerous cause.
In the late 70s and early 80s, a legitimate Puerto Rican independence movement took hold in the United States. But a splinter terrorist group known as the FALN was suspected of executing hundreds of bombings in major U.S. cities. I'm Jim Kellstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. The terrorists were smart, well-organized, and deadly, and went to great lengths to conceal their identities. Agents were determined to shut them down before they hit again.
New York City, October 26, 1974. Just after midnight. 5 explosions rock Manhattan. New York City police officers race to the scenes. The biggest explosion occurs in the financial district. NYPD detective Elmer Toro leads the investigation. One look at the devastation and Toro knows he will be lucky to find any useful evidence. It appears the bombers used dynamite.
The problem with bombings is that most of the evidence disappears at the scene. It disappears because how do you trace dynamite? We had no way of tracing dynamite. You can hope for a fingerprint here and there. You can hope for a witness.
Police question everyone in the area, but no one had seen the bomber. The pattern of debris indicates the bomb was placed under a car.
It was put under the engine block, and it picked up the car, and the engine just flew up in the air. Pieces landed up all the way up on the 6th floor. It was a pretty impressive bombing. We did realize quickly that we had a serious problem in our hands.
The only solid clue found at the scene is the tattered remains of what appears to be a leather luggage handle. While police continue to process the scene, they get a call from the Associated Press. One of the alleged bombers called the news agency and told them to look at a phone booth near the bomb site. The patrolman is dispatched to the location. There, under the phone, he finds a letter. He takes it to headquarters to study it for leads. The letter is from a group calling themselves the FALN. In Spanish, the initials stand for the Armed Forces for the National Liberation of Puerto Rico. They are a fringe group with a limited following.
The FALN is not even known in Puerto Rico. It's known to the radical, it's known to those fighting for independence, but in general, you speak to the average Puerto Rican, and the FALN is totally unknown to them.
The former Spanish colony of Puerto Rico is voluntarily part of the United States. In elections, more than 90% of Puerto Ricans vote to continue to be part of the U.S., while less than 5% vote for independence. Now that 5% has turned dangerous. In the letter, the FALN demands that the U.S. abandon Puerto Rico, or more bombs will explode.
These are not people that believe in the electoral system. Their objective is to be violent and, through fear, cause the people to support them.
What began as a bombing investigation is now a terrorist attack. And fighting terrorism is the job of the FBI. The NYPD goes to the Bureau. Detective Toro briefs FBI Special Agent Don Wofford on the evidence found at the bombing locations.
The evidence showed that the device was a dynamite-like high explosive, definitely set off by some kind of detonator, because that's the only thing that sets off the sticks of dynamite. There were plenty of pieces to show a watch had been used as the timing device, and plenty of pieces of a battery showing that the battery had been used to complete the circuit. Pieces of debris showing that this device was in some kind of bag. Several pieces of a handle were found.
It's not much to go on, but it's all the investigators have. They try to find out who made the handle. Perhaps they can use the information to learn who bought it. They then turn their attention to the communique. It demands the U.S. abandon Puerto Rico and release 5 Puerto Rican terrorists from federal prison. The terrorists have been in prison since the 1950s. Decades earlier, on November 1st, 1950, 2 Puerto Rican gunmen try to assassinate President Harry Truman and fail. 2 Washington, D.C. policemen are badly injured in the gun battle. 1 policeman, as well as one of the terrorists, dies. The surviving gunman is sentenced to life in prison. 3 years later, 4 more pro-independence Puerto Ricans are sent to prison after opening fire in the House of Representatives. Now Detective Toro and Agent Wofford theorize friends or family of the 5 may be behind this new terror group.
I was hopeful that working on the background and the current status, maybe, of those 5 political prisoners would be some kind of lead. So we went behind each of those people. We checked their mailing list. We checked their people who visited them.
At the same time, the NYPD and FBI monitor any Puerto Rican activists who have a history of promoting violence. 1 month after the bombing, the NYPD gets a call about a dead body in an abandoned building in Spanish Harlem. Rookie NYPD officer Angel Poggi, on his first day on the job, goes to investigate. Officer Poggi is of Puerto Rican descent and proud to have become one of New York City's finest.
The door was booby-trapped, and he blasted him right across the street and ended his career on the spot.
Although Officer Poggi survived the blast, he lost sight in his right eye. When police search the building, they find no dead body. The phone call was a lie to lure police into a deadly trap. The bomb squad recovers explosive residue and another luggage handle. Like the earlier bombing, they determined this bomb was made of dynamite. From the pattern of the blast damage, they suspect it was probably hung on the back of the door, possibly in a garment bag. Through another phone tip, police recover an FALN communique that proudly claims credit for bombing Officer Poggi. For the NYPD, this investigation has become personal.
They're fighting for Puerto Rican independence, and the first cop they mutilate is a Puerto Rican kid. A Puerto Rican kid, because that's all he was. When they get to your house, you sort of react a little bit different. We knew we had a war in our hands.
The communique says the bombing is revenge for the death of an obscure Puerto Rican poet, Martin Tito Perez.
If you had put Martin Tito Perez's name out in Spanish Harlem, probably a lot of people might have known who he was. But in the rest of Manhattan and in the rest of the United States, of course, nobody would have known who Martin Tito Perez was, except the bomber knew. At this point, we knew we had a Spanish Harlem connection.
A few days earlier, police photographed a Puerto Rican man in Spanish Harlem, handing out leaflets accusing the police of murdering Martin Perez in jail. Although Perez's death was officially ruled a suicide, the activist urges violent revenge against the police. His name is William Morales.
William Morales was a very activist person in Spanish Harlem. He was one of the Puerto Rican independence type people who were at any demonstration, any rally or whatever. He was a player in the Puerto Rican independence movement.
While Morales seems suspicious, police don't have enough to bring him in. They continue their search for anyone who knows anything about the crippling attack on Officer Poggi, but come up empty. While the investigation stalls, the FALN set their sights on a historic tavern in the heart of New York's financial district. The terrorists are raising the stakes for their deadly cause. The terrorist group, called the FALN, detonates a series of bombs all over New York City. The FBI struggles to piece together the evidence in time to stop the bombers before they strike again. They are fighting a losing battle. Historic Francis Tavern in the financial district is a popular lunch spot for Wall Street brokers. January 24th, a bomb explodes during the lunch rush. The blast kills 4 people and injures more than 60. The victims are rushed to area hospitals. FBI Special Agent Don Wofford.
It's one of the worst explosive crime scenes I've seen in my Bureau career. The entire first floor was nothing but splinters. All of the tables and chairs and walls and everything was just splinters.
Okay, look up here.
The first bombs did not kill anyone. The second targeted a single individual. This time, the bombers clearly intended to kill as many people as possible.
This was a midday bomb, not 3 o'clock in the morning, not a bomb hung in an abandoned tenement, but a bomb put in an active restaurant full of people.
It is a scene that FBI Special Agent Rick Hahn will never forget.
The streets were wet, having been hosed down to hose off the blood and damage to the individuals that had been injured or died at the scene. Seeing that scene impacted me in such a way that I really wanted to make sure that we solved those cases.
At the site of the blast, investigators again find a luggage handle similar to the one found at the earlier bombings. Independently, witnesses tell them that a few minutes before the bomb exploded, a suspicious man left a garment bag.
He's not dressed to be in Francis Tavern restaurant with Wall Street brokers at noon. He must have taken a wrong turn, and why is he leaving that bag? Didn't reach down and turn on any switches, according to all the witnesses. He just dropped it. So that bomb was ticking. That thing was going. And based on the damage it did, it probably had 20 to 30 sticks of dynamite in it. So there's a man walking around Manhattan with a bomb with 20 or 30 sticks of dynamite in it. That takes some dedication.
And his hair was parted.
Witnesses work with a police artist to develop sketches of the suspect. This group was clearly becoming more dangerous, and the FBI intensifies their efforts.
Look, I got this sketch on.
The FBI distributes the sketch all over New York. But investigators can't find anyone who matches the description.
So on these letters,
In the lab, technicians review what little physical evidence they have. They turn to the letters left at each of the sites outlining the terrorist group demands.
Their objective was to kill executives from U.S. corporations, and they say that right in the communique. Corporate America is seen in those days as part of the military-industrial complex, and as such, attacking U.S. corporations is as good as attacking the U.S. government.
right here.
Lab technicians confirmed that all 3 FALN communiques use the same paper, typeface, and letterhead.
On the end,
It's not much to go on.
he used the same.
We found out, to our chagrin, that the complete communique, the paper, the ink, the font, the type, the stencil, the logo, and everything could be bought at 1 million different places in Manhattan.
I think you already know.
The luggage handles do provide lab technicians with a promising lead.
Type of bag.
The garment bags used to hide the bombs are all one particular model made by one manufacturer.
Find out where.
It could be the break the investigators need. The FBI contacts the manufacturer for a list of every store in the New York area that carries the bags. Over the next few weeks, investigators visit each store and show the sketch. But no one seems to recognize the suspect. The bombings continue. 3 months after the Francis Tavern bombing, an FALN communique takes credit for 4 bombs that explode after midnight in Midtown Manhattan. Then, 800 miles away in Chicago, the unimaginable happens. Bombs explode at 2 banks. An FALN communique takes credit. The terrorists are now a nationwide threat. In the New York FBI office, investigators compare the Chicago communique with earlier FALN communiques.
We know immediately when we get the communique, from the masthead being the same, from the logo being the same, that this is in fact our FALN.
This gives investigators new angles to pursue.
There's a whole new theory that arises from that, and that is that we can't find them in New York because they're really a Chicago-based group.
The FBI contacts Special Agent William Dyson in the Chicago field office.
This is the first time Chicago is being involved in this group called the FALN. New York has a very large Puerto Rican population, and it appeared as though these attacks were going to be strictly in New York. Now Chicago comes new on the scene. So we were really not sure what to do. We're turning to New York saying, do you have any leads? Can you give us a hint? Where do we go?
Somehow, the FALN must communicate or travel between New York and Chicago. The FBI and police begin rechecking their list of potential suspects.
We can look at our New York people and see what kind of Chicago connections they have. Do they travel to Chicago at all? Do they, in turn, have visitors from Chicago? Is the travel the reverse? Do we see Chicago people in New York, and then do we have a bombing?
Investigators determined that several of the Puerto Rican activists they had been watching in New York have links to Chicago.
We had all of our people that we thought were interested under 24-hour surveillance. And by that, I mean we were sticking with them wherever they went. I would spend weeks and weeks on the street. We just couldn't get to the next level.
Their surveillance is not working, and the terror continues. 9 months after the Francis Tavern bombing, bombs again explode in New York. This time, the bombs also tear through the financial centers of Chicago and Washington, D.C. Once again, the FALN takes credit. After the attack, law enforcement in Chicago and corporate security guards respond by searching around their buildings. Outside the corporate headquarters of an oil company, guards discover a suspicious bouquet of flowers linked to FALN.
And they find 14 roses, high quality roses, like you would give for Mother's Day or something of that nature. Within these roses is this bomb.
The Chicago police bomb tech defuses the bomb. Now, for the first time, investigators will have the opportunity to examine an unexploded FALN bomb, which could provide critical leads. A crime lab technician reads the unique identification numbers on the sticks of dynamite. It is traced to a dam project in New Mexico, but the trail stops there. No dynamite was reported stolen. When that lead proves to be a dead end, investigators try to trace the bouquet of roses.
We've got to go to the florist. Well, it turns out there's something like 800 florists in the Chicago area. We went to every one of them. When I say we, I mean law enforcement. It wasn't just the FBI. We all got together, and we all divided up all the florist shops, and we went to every one of them. Could not find where those roses came from.
Back in New York, the FBI realizes the components of this bomb match the other bombs. Investigators compile lists of all the stores in the New York City area that sell each of the items. They find one store that sells everything.
We identify a store up in the Bronx that sells the particular types of watches that have been used, it sells the propane tanks. More importantly, it sells the types of bags that have been used to contain the bombs.
The FBI theorizes that maybe the bombers got sloppy and bought everything at the same store. At the store, investigators show the owner the composite sketch.
Couldn't say by name who the person was, but that a person similar in appearance to that person had been in his store, definitely buying a whole series of the bags and a whole series of the batteries.
Investigators believe this could be a major break. They show the store owner photos of possible suspects. She can't positively ID any of them, but she does agree to help.
We did solicit the cooperation of the owner of the store. She allowed us to go in and mark discreetly the bags, the watches, those sorts of things, to see whether or not they would be used in a device.
These marks might survive the blast and could confirm the items were purchased from her store. Investigators also establish round-the-clock surveillance.
And when a person bought a bag, we would put a surveillance on that individual and try to identify who this individual was and try to match the composite to the purchaser of the bag.
Now the agents will have to wait and see if the terrorists walk into their trap. In New York, a terrorist group called the FALN plants a series of bombs, killing 4 people and injuring more than 60. Now they've expanded their terror spree to other American cities, including Washington, D.C. and Chicago. The FBI has been struggling to get a lead on the group. They learn that items similar to those used to make the bombs are all sold in a store in the Bronx. Agents set up surveillance. But after months of watching the store, they find nothing. Perhaps the terrorists have already stockpiled supplies. Or perhaps they have spotted their surveillance and are once again one step ahead of investigators. Months after the most recent bombing, the case takes a bizarre twist in Chicago. The police there get an odd tip. An informant reports that a man at a garage has been trying to sell sticks of dynamite to street gangs. The responding officer hears hammering and sees a man trying to break open a trunk.
Hey, stand up. Put the hammer down now.
The officer also spots dynamite.
Put your hands up where I can see him.
The man says his friend stole it from an apartment that contains even more explosives. The FBI rushes to the apartment. Inside, they find more than 100 sticks of dynamite and other bomb-making materials. FBI Special Agent William Dyson.
So we not only have explosives, but we also have propane tanks. We have a lot of drilled-out wristwatches. We even have communiques.
Investigators feel confident they have discovered an FALN bomb factory.
We definitely have the FALN, there's no question about it. The problem is, who are the people connected with this apartment?
While the bomb squad renders the building safe, investigators question tenants who say no one lives in the apartment. They say they have seen 2 people going in and out, the building's owner, Carlos Torres, and his wife.
One of the things that struck us right away was this lack of sophistication here. The idea of having a bomb factory in your own building. The idea of you being the landlord of the building, the person who would have the access to all the vacant apartments, who would have the keys, just is plain stupid. So now we got 2 suspects, obviously, because not only do they own the building, but residents say they have access. They've seen them up in this apartment.
Investigators search for Carlos Torres, the building's owner, and his wife, Haiti. but they have vanished, which reinforces investigators' belief that they have finally identified members of the FALN. The FBI systematically hunts for the bomb factory fugitives. They begin with a thorough background investigation.
We pretty much followed the normal fugitive procedures, and that basically is to try to make a biography on each one of these individuals. Who are they? Where did they come from? Who are all their relatives? Make a family tree. We make a family tree on these people better than they would make one. We try to find out every person that's related to them in one way, shape, or form.
Agents interview and watch all of their known relatives and friends. But the fugitives have disappeared without a trace. At the same time, the FBI focuses on an odd document found in the bomb factory. It seems all the Chicago FALN suspects belong to the same Latino church committee. The Chicago FBI notifies New York.
Take it a really close
FBI Special Agent Rick Hahn.
There was a suspicion that the FALN had co-opted this organization, this charitable organization, for its own purposes, to use it for travel, to use it for funding.
FBI Special Agent Don Wofford reviews records that show the Chicago suspects used church-paid tickets to fly to New York before several past bombings.
There's lots of travel back and forth, financed by the organization, because ostensibly it is supposed to be lending and giving grants for people to start neighborhood community type Hispanic activities, like Spanish Bibles and hymnals maybe for a church in a Hispanic neighborhood, that kind of thing.
Investigators also discovered that the church committee includes a familiar face, New York pro-violence radical William Morales. They keep a close watch on Morales and all the members of the church committee, but investigators don't see anything suspicious. They don't have enough probable cause to request wiretaps or search warrants.
We've taken a lot of heat. You know, a lot of people were asking, what are you guys doing? You know, these people keep on blowing up all these, what are you guys doing?
6 months later, at the Mobile Oil Building near Grand Central Station, a bomb in an employment office kills one person and injures 8.
She came in, she put the umbrella on.
The FBI and NYPD arrive and question witnesses. A woman who takes job applications claims she saw the bomber.
She was, you know, I know who left that bomb because I saw her and I talked to her, and I cannot believe a little girl, she kept saying, a little girl like that would leave a bomb in here and blow somebody up. But I saw her, and that's who left it.
The witness says a woman came in carrying a closed umbrella that seemed unusually heavy.
She knew when she hung that device there, when it went off, somebody was going to get hurt.
The suspect took a job application.
She scratched quick a name and an address. The bomb is clicking right next to her. She wants to get out of there fast.
The suspect tried to leave, but the woman wouldn't let her take the application with her. Minutes later, the bomb went off, decapitating the man next to it. Because he absorbed most of the blast, no one else was killed.
I do know that I could recognize her because I saw her and I talked to her.
Investigators asked for the application, hoping the suspect left a fingerprint. If they could find a print, it would be their first piece of solid evidence to the identity of the bombers. The lab uncovers nothing on the front of the application. But on the back, they find what they had been looking for: a single fingerprint. The fingerprint belongs to Haiti Torres, the wife of Carlos Torres, who owned the recently discovered FALN bomb factory in Chicago. New York City police issue a warrant for her arrest for second-degree murder. After a grand jury indictment, her husband Carlos is added to the FBI's top 10 fugitive list. Now that agents have identified their suspects, they must hope for a break that will uncover where the fugitives are hiding before they strike again. A terror group called the FALN plants bombs in major cities around the country, including New York and Chicago, killing 5 people and injuring more than 80. In New York, the FBI suspects that William Morales, a pro-violence radical, is somehow connected to the group. But after months of surveillance, investigators haven't seen anything suspicious. The FBI finally asks Morales if he will talk with them. Surprisingly, he agrees. FBI Special Agent Don Wofford watches through a one-way mirror as Detective Elmer Toro questions Morales about the FALN terrorist group. But he gives them nothing.
Cool, collected, not the least bit upset, not intimidated whatsoever. I don't know nothing about nothing.
Investigators watch for clues to try and determine if it is just an act.
My position was, he's a player. He's definitely a player. Maybe he is a minor league player and he doesn't know anything. I don't believe it, but maybe. But he's a player.
Investigators continue to suspect Morales. But without more evidence, there are legal limits to how far they can go. 2 months later, Queens, New York. Firefighters respond to an explosion in an apartment and find FALN letterhead. FBI agent Wofford arrives just as paramedics take a badly injured man from the apartment. Agent Wofford believes the man may be an FALN suspect and tries to identify him. But the man's face is badly injured and his hands are nearly blown off. Inside the bare apartment, investigators find 3 small pipe bombs. Evidence suggests a 4th pipe bomb exploded while being built, which explains how the man injured his hands. Investigators discover a copying machine and papers printed with the FALN logo. They also find a large stockpile of explosives. Detective Elmer Toro goes to the hospital to try to identify the suspected bomb maker. The man's hands are so badly injured that police are unable to get fingerprints. Detective Toro tells the man that investigators will learn his identity from evidence at the bomb factory.
You can see this.
He might as well admit his name now. But the man can't speak.
Manuel Rodrigo.
I wrote a bunch of names, people that I suspected. Once we got to the name of William Morales, he moved and he agreed without saying who he was. But he basically identified himself.
Detective Toro believes they may have captured the FALN's bomb maker. Toro grills him for information about the organization.
We got you today.
But Morales refuses to cooperate. 9 months later, Morales goes on trial for reckless endangerment and possession of dangerous weapons.
Well, Morales didn't fight. Morales claimed a prisoner of war status, no defense, which is a dream for the prosecution.
The judge sentences him to 89 years. Police take Morales to the jail ward of Bellevue Hospital to be fitted with artificial hands before going to prison. Incredibly, despite police guards in the hallway, he manages to escape. Investigators rush to Morales' hospital room.
My initial reaction was, this is just a bad joke. This is just a bad, yeah, right, sure he's escaped. How could he escape? First off, he's physically unable to escape. And secondly, he's up on the 3rd floor.
There's nothing down there. It's just, we don't have him.
They find the window bars and mesh cut open.
The mesh had been spread apart not more than 6 to 8 inches, just about like this.
I mean, that's straight down.
So he had to squeeze through that hole and get out of the mesh And then how did he get down 3 floors? And of course, coming to mind immediately was he had help.
Investigators begin to piece together what happened. Someone must have smuggled in a pair of bolt cutters.
William Morales cut himself out from the 3rd floor with his elbows. Because he had no hands.
Investigators believe Morales jumped 3 floors to the ground, where waiting accomplices drove him away. The FBI and NYPD launch an all-out manhunt for Morales and alert the public and police across the country to be on the lookout. But months go by, and the manhunt turns up nothing. Then the terrorists strike again. 6 months after Morales' escape, the FALN begins bombing again in New York, Chicago, and San Juan, Puerto Rico. 1 year after William Morales' escape, just north of Chicago, Evanston police respond to reports of an illegally parked van. They radio in the license, which comes back stolen. Police decide to watch the stolen van to see if anyone comes back.
So they surveil it. I mean, they could have towed it away, but they surveil it.
A short while later, a man and woman drive up to the van and begin loading it.
Police, put your hands up! Let me see your hands! Let me see your hands! Turn around! Face away from me! Stay right where you are!
Police confront the two and find rifles. The suspects have no ID and refuse to speak, leaving police at a loss.
Where'd the weapons come from?
They can't even figure out what nationality they are. So they bring him in. So they got those 2 people.
A few hours later, in the same Chicago suburb, a citizen calls Evanston police to complain about a truck parked in a wealthy neighborhood. The woman says people have been coming up to the truck and climbing in the back all morning.
A police officer comes out and tries to talk to the driver.
What are y'all doing here in the neighborhood?
Why are you here? Well, I'm visiting. Who are you visiting? I'm visiting that person over there. Well, who is that person? Well, I don't know his name and all. And vague type of descriptions.
It all seems very suspicious.
You don't know the names at all?
The officer glances into the truck and spots the butt of a handgun.
Gun! Put your hands.
Now he knows he's dealing with armed suspects, and there may be more of them hiding in the back of the truck.
Step out of the vehicle, sir.
Amid a rash of terror bombings, officers in Evanston, Illinois, arrest a suspicious couple. In the back of their truck, police find people with shotguns, handguns, and disguises. Officers arrest them as well. Evanston police photograph and fingerprint their prisoners.
No, I've got the list. Can you run it for
They
me?
also check their identification, but they run into a problem. The names on their IDs prove to be false. Detectives try to interview the suspects, but they refuse to talk.
First name is Lane.
Sensing they are onto something big, the police call the FBI. FBI Special Agent William Dyson looks at the prisoners and immediately recognizes one as a major FALN terrorist.
I've got his wanted poster, top 10 fugitive, and I recognize him. I mean, this is Carlos Torres.
Agent Dyson also recognizes other prisoners as members of the FALN.
It was like looking at this collage that I had above my desk in the office of all these wanted people. So we have the FALN. We know we have the FALN. We're able to identify enough of them. This is the FALN.
The FBI takes a closer look at the false IDs. From past experience, the FBI knows that criminals who use fake ID often include a real address so that it can be used to function in society. Agents notice that several of the IDs have the same Chicago address. FBI and Chicago police raid that address and find bomb-making materials and more FALN evidence. With information from the captured terrorists, agents raid addresses in Milwaukee, New York, and New Jersey. They take down more FALN safe houses. 6 years after the bombings began, a federal jury finds the captured FALN terrorists guilty of seditious conspiracy, weapons violations, interstate transportation of stolen vehicles, and other charges. But notorious FALN suspected leader William Morales still remains a fugitive. Just before sentencing, one FALN member decides to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. He says the 11 terrorists were in Evanston to rob an armored car to finance more bombings. He also describes a meeting at a Milwaukee safe house.
They had this meeting in which they plot this thing out, and the man leading the meeting, he's got a mask on, so you can't recognize him. But he's got no hands. So immediately, everybody knew it was William Morales.
Fanatical FALN leader William Morales' hands were maimed years earlier while making a bomb. Investigators press for more information, but the cooperating FALN member doesn't know how to find Morales. Agents try a different approach and question their informant about how the FALN recruits members.
We have to know how they bring new people into the group. Once we know that, then we can go after them.
Strong activists who are ready to do.
Investigators learn that the FALN recruits from the ranks of Puerto Rican radicals. Anyone who joins must drop all political activities in order to maintain a low profile. With that pattern in mind, FBI Special Agent Rick Hahn searches through hundreds of files on Puerto Rican radicals. It's a long-shot attempt to identify the remaining FALN terrorists.
We looked for individuals that had stopped attending rallies and things like that, that had made themselves quite well known prior to that time. And we focused on them for surveillances.
More than a year passes before the FBI finally finds one suspect who seems to lead a double life.
Very, very quickly, we realize this guy's clandestine. He's doing things that's not normal.
Agents track the suspect to an FALN safe house. Based on the suspect's behavior, the FBI gets a court order allowing listening devices and wiretaps. In March 1983, 2 years after first gaining cooperation from the FALN informant, the FBI gets a break. Through a wiretap, they overhear a suspected FALN member on the phone asking a mysterious man in Mexico to come to Chicago.
He refused to come up and said, basically, why don't you come visit me? I'm having plastic surgery done. I'm in need of good identification. I can't come into the country. I'll be too easily recognized, that sort of thing.
The mysterious man says to call the same number in a week. In a huge break, investigators identify the mystery voice as that of the FALN's fugitive leader.
By his voice, we were pretty sure that it was probably William Morales.
It's the first time the FBI has heard Morales' voice since his bold escape from New York police custody 4 years earlier. The FBI traces terrorist leader William Morales' phone call to a cafe in Puebla, Mexico. Back in Chicago, the FBI is stuck. They have no jurisdiction in Mexico. Agents plan to continue listening to their wiretap and arrest Morales when he makes his plan to come back to America. But since Morales may have had plastic surgery and significantly changed his appearance, agents ask Mexican federales to secretly photograph him. FBI Special Agent Rick Hahn.
The federales went down to that coffee shop and found Morales seated at a table there.
Morales had severely maimed his hands years earlier while making a bomb. He cannot protect himself or fire a gun. The FBI warns the Federales he is probably accompanied by an armed bodyguard. FBI Special Agent Don Wolford.
We told him, these guys got backup, watch it. You just can't walk up with this guy and say, in the car.
The Federales don't see a bodyguard and decide to make the arrest themselves. NYPD Detective Elmer Toro.
They were not supposed to take him down. They were supposed to take photographs. And they decided to make the arrest. And Willie Morales, like a nice trained terrorist, he simply gave up and provided the opportunity for his bodyguard to step out of the restaurant.
The bodyguard opens fire, shooting both Federales, one of them critically. The other Federale returns fire, killing the bodyguard. He takes Morales into custody, but his arrest comes at a great price. The wounded Federale dies on the way to the hospital. New York Police Detective Elmer Toro immediately flies down to Mexico to interview Morales and try to arrange his return.
Morales being in police custody and having killed a police officer, I'm sure was subject to some degree of torture by the Federales down there.
Morales greets Detective Toro like a long-lost friend.
He was happy to see me, and he said to me, and I always remember, he says, Elmer, I want to go back with you.
Take me with you.
Detective Toro says he'll draw up the papers, and Morales promises to sign.
Sign anything. Just take me with you. Okay, Willie.
Once Mexican police learn that Morales is going back to the U.S., they treat him better to avoid a possible scandal.
Okay.
Back at his hotel, Detective Toro calls the FBI with the incredible news about Morales.
Getting anything done in Mexico is like, forget it. But now he's talking about, I want to come back. And we're all saying, thank you, Lord. All right. Let him come back.
But it's not that simple.
All of a sudden I put the 6 o'clock news, and there is the bastard denouncing us.
Morales appears on TV, flanked by radical lawyers from Cuba, the U.S., and Mexico. He now angrily condemns America.
By this time, he's got a battery of attorneys from all over the place. He had people from Cuba, the attorneys from Cuba, very powerful attorneys. And once he was protected by these attorneys, he didn't need Elmer Toro anymore. He didn't want to come back anymore.
Detective Toro now realizes that Morales used him to gain better treatment in jail while waiting for his lawyers to arrive. In the months to come, Cuba uses its influence and money to win the release of Morales.
He's on the beach in Cuba, in Cienfuegos, Cuba, I believe. Sooner or later, Fidel Castro's government is going to go, and maybe we'll see Morales at that point.
With Morales in permanent exile and other key members in prison, the FALN's 8-year reign of terror comes to an end. The FBI and police, through dedicated investigative work and patient long-term surveillance, have defeated one of the most deadly domestic terror groups in U.S. history.